Hi guys, this is going to be the second of a DBQ tutorial that I recorded. 35 minutes is crazy. That's way too long. That is just too much. So I'm going to try to be really efficient, really succinct, while also addressing as many of your concerns as I possibly can. I'm going to start this off by saying I truly believe that each and every one of you are going to have very few problems doing a really good job on this DBQ on May 15th. I really think that each of you have strong writing skills. I think that your anxiety is totally normal. But overall, I'm fairly confident in your ability to write a really strong DBQ in a 45-minute period. Now, that being said, you have 45 minutes, so you really want to use your time as efficiently as possible. That goes without saying. So one of the things I want to impress upon you is there's kind of a couple different things here at play. You're concerned that you want to make sure that you address all of the documents, but you also don't want to spend too much time in your prep period in thinking about should I be spending 15 minutes in a reading period, or should I be doing 8 to 10? I honestly think, given the fact that you have 45 minutes, and you're typing, I do think that capping your document analysis, your document annotation to 10 minutes is a pretty good place to start. So you're not going to be using the prerequisite like 15 minutes. I'm not sure if you ever necessarily did. Now, however, if you are someone who's really concerned about your ability to analyze sources, so some of you in here, right, I think overall you're fairly in a good place, right? None of you said that you had no confidence, and none of you said you were supremely confident, which, good for you. I'm not going to even spend too much time talking about how to write a thesis, because it seems to me that everyone here feels fairly good about that. So I'm not going to even address that. But you feel pretty good about the context. Referencing the sources is really what you're worried about. So I'm going to try to address that. And then you kind of have all these little different bits and pieces, right? Contextualization, how to make an argument that can be split into 3 paragraphs. So I'm going to try to address all of this as much as I can, as efficiently as I can, and not in 35 minutes. Some of you were really sweet and were like, no, it's totally fine. 35 minutes of a person talking about a DBQ is too much time. I know we have all the time in the world, but come on, that's crazy pants. So let's chat about, I'm going to look at a specific document, like a kind of a question. A lot of the sources I'm using for you guys, the updated DBQ rubric, comes from this guy named Tom Ritchie, who puts out all this stuff, and it's fairly good. I kind of like it. So the day of the exam, May 15th at 2 p.m., not 4 p.m., as I incorrectly told you, and I apologize for that. I did update that on Learning, by the way. You have 45 minutes. It's going to take about 5 minutes to upload, so on and so forth. He says 15 minutes reading the documents and 30 minutes writing your response. I think it should be a little bit more like 10 minutes, 35. But again, if your primary concern is understanding those sources, then that is what it is. I also know that some of you had some questions about test security and what you can use and where you'll be writing this. I'll get back to you on that. I don't have that information with me right now, but I will definitely be posting that. If not, definitely this coming week, even though it's April vacation. So again, at the end of the day, you're just writing an essay and you're using sources that are given to you to kind of help gear you in a certain direction. So contextualization is a big piece here. You want to be able, and what does that mean? What does contextualization mean? And this is what I kind of always think about when I think about context. If I walked into a movie 20 minutes late or 30 minutes late, well, I'd be a jerk face, but I would say, what happened? What did I miss? That's what context is. You want to explain. You want to give a sense to the reader, right? This is where this source is coming from. This is the period in which it's coming from. Contextualization and point of view oftentimes go hand in hand, right? You're telling me a little bit about the period in which that source was created. So for example, and I'm not going to go through every single thing. That was part of the problem in the previous one I just did. I went through like all the sources. So let's take a look at this first source, and we're going to do two things. We're going to analyze the source, and then we can try to contextualize the source. So first things first, let's just talk about what is actually happening in here. Well, I'm scanning through and I see the word effigy, which he's very nicely defined for you. So you also have some violence here. You have the big capitalized word stamp duty. Okay, well, something's going on here about people protesting the Stamp Act. That's what's happening in North Carolina in 1765. And the Stamp Act is from 1765. Stamp Act. So they're protesting the Stamp Act. That's what's literally happening here. North Carolina, the North Carolina newspaper is reporting upon a protest about the Stamp Act. Okay, the end, right? That's what this literally is. So what, though, is the point of view? What is the context? So what is the Stamp Act? What was it designed to do? Why did it exist? What was happening that led to the Stamp Act, right? It doesn't just exist in a vacuum. You have to explain the origin story of the Stamp Act. And then by doing that, you're not just describing the source, you're contextualizing it, and you're telling me the point of view. So that's what you want to think about when you're looking at a source. Let's move on to the next one. This is a piece of legislation, right? If you see the word act, that means it's a law. If you see parliament, this is an expedient that revenue should be raised. Okay, so what are they raising revenue on? Glass, lead, paint colors, tea, right? Paper. It's also in 1767. Now, here's what's going to happen here. Some of you might right away be like, oh, this is the Townsend Acts. These are the Townsend duties. They're placing taxes on everyday items that colonists need, okay? Because the Stamp Act is ultimately repealed because of the outrage on the part of the colonists. But they're not done, right? British Parliament is like, we want our money now. So they continue this policy of taxation, and these are the Townsend duties. What is the reaction to the Townsend duties, right? Well, at the very core of it, what are these new British taxation policies all about? Where are they coming from? Like, for example, say we're not even looking at this DBQ. Say we're looking at something like Reconstruction. We're looking at someone saying that Reconstruction was a huge victory. It was a glorious revolution. And you looked at the 13th Amendment, right? Okay, fine. And then you could say, well, what was the purpose of the 13th Amendment? What was it designed to do? What was it addressing? What problems, what concerns in the United States? And then you could talk about, well, the next source is the portrait, is a political cartoon celebrating the creation of the KKK from a South Carolina newspaper. And so what these essays are asking you to do is that, like, it's not just enough to say, like, I kind of know what happened. They're less interested in you being able to memorize, and they're looking for you to analyze. But in order to do analysis, you actually do have to understand what's going on in the period. So I think what will alleviate a lot of your concerns, and going up to the exam, we can do this, is if I were you, I would create like a little study guide about each period, 3 through 7. A brief, and use your own words. Use words that you think are really going to be useful for you. What are the big takeaways for each period? What is going on? 3 or 4 bullet points, so that when you're looking at sources that are dealing with a particular time period, write the time periods in there. Write period 3 is 1754 to 1800. Period 4 is 1800 to 1848, or whatever it is, right? Write those time periods in there, because then when you have to go look at your stuff, you can say, okay, that's what's happening in this period of time. There's not an expectation that you have an encyclopedic knowledge of U.S. history, because there's a lot, right? But what they want you to be able to do is look at a source, not just say, this is what's happening in it, but like, what is it? What's the background of it? What is it's there? I think the other concern for a lot of you is reference, like how do I actually reference the source correctly? I can, in the future, I can post some sample responses from students. I'm hesitant to do so only because your DBQ experience is going to be so very different than everyone else's. But if you want to take a look here in these, no, not that one. Sorry. This one, I think it's this one. Yeah. So this is a sample that I used from Tom Ritchie and how he references the source. And I just kind of wanted to just highlight this because this seems to be a major concern for a lot of you. How do I reference a source in the best way possible? So he talks about taxation tension between the United States, where the American colonies and the British government grow because of an economic policy and a military policy that's implemented by the British to defend these new taxation policies. And he does so much more eloquently than I did just then. And that's where his thesis is, right? It's in bold. Okay. And then he contextualizes unfair taxation, provoked protests from American colonists, right? That is his topic sentence. He talks about the Sugar Act, which, by the way, is not a new tax. It is actually a tax that existed. They're just enforcing it in any case. But this is what I want to focus on right here. Right here. Parliament also passed the Stamp Act, which infuriated colonists. He could have given the date. If you don't know the date, don't include it. Such as a group of colonists in North Carolina who burned a man in effigy to protest his support for the Stamp Act. And then he writes document 1. Okay? He doesn't reference it by title. You can. I encourage you to. You don't have to, though. There's a lot of different ways to do this. He puts in parentheses document 1. You don't have to. I think it's a good way. I think you should do that. I think you should put in parentheses after you reference it, put in like document 1 because it helps you keep track. But you notice how he is not saying in document 1, it says how a man was burned in effigy because he's made an argument and he's using that source to support it. And he's doing so in the past tense. I know this is crazy to harp on this. Using the past tense is super important because it does elevate the sophistication of your essay and it makes it sound like you know what you're talking about. Okay? Don't get too wordy. Don't get bogged down into going into all the nitty-gritty details. Do not go into depth talking about, right? Parliament repealed the Stamp Act but passed the Townshend Acts, which imported paper, paint, lead, glass, and tea. He didn't quote it. He's just giving you context, right? He could have done this a different way. This is the way he chose to do it. This is fine. This is strong. He's demonstrating that he understands the period, that he knows what sources to use. So when you are writing this DBQ, the first thing, you have 2 options. 1, go through all the sources, figure out what the fluff they mean. That's 1. 2, figure out what's actually going on between 1754 and 1776, right? Or whatever period they're giving you. And then you probably have some sort of study guide available to you to do so, right? This is an open note. And then write an essay, like you've written millions of essays in the past. And so I'm going to wrap up here because this is already probably too long anyway. But what you want to do is really think meaningfully about how can I show this person who's grading my essay, I know like 80% of this period. Right? We're not looking for 100%. We're not looking for 90%. We're looking for 80%. I think this will be a little bit more useful once we start doing the actual writing piece. Now you're just doing the kind of like the lead up to it. But once we get into the written piece where you're typing things and sharing things with me, we can get a little bit into the nitty gritty details. But until then, hopefully this helped a little bit. I don't know if it did, but I hope it did. And if you have any questions about anything, you're like, Ms. Bassen, you totally did not address X, Y, or Z, let me know, reach out, and we can have a chat. All right?